What constitutes a human act? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Immortal Combat Podcast. The Immortal Combat Podcast is the podcast arm of Viri Christi. Viri Christi is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help young men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at virichristi.com. All right, fellas, this is the Intro to Moral Theology, episode 14. Okay, what we're going to try to answer this week is what constitutes a human act? Or the fancy way of saying is, what is the ethical constitution of the human act? What makes a human act a moral one? Okay. Now, remember last week we talked about the fact that our choices, our conduct, our choices, they will determine our next life. So our choices determine whether we end up in heaven or hell. We ever end up in perfect happiness and with God for all eternity, or we don't. And we talked about the fact that God's wisdom demands that because he shouldn't give this precious gift to just any old person. We also talked about the human dignity demands it because God's going to respect our choices. And if we tell him we don't want anything to do with him, he'll respect that choice. If we respond to him that we love him and want to live for him, he's going to respect that choice as well. Okay. We also talked about the difference between a human act and an act of a human. And I want to draw your guys' mind back to this because we're going to deepen our understanding a little bit more on what a human act is. This is not overly difficult. I think you guys will walk away after this podcast and have a good understanding of what's going on here. But it's very fundamental. What I mean by that is it's kind of this base idea that we're going to keep unpacking as we go. Okay. All right. So what is a human act? Okay. An act of a human, we talked about last week. These are acts that a person does involuntary. So an act of a human is something a human being legitimately does, like sleepwalking, snoring, sneezing. These are acts that humans do, but they're not choosing to do those. Okay. So humans do them, but there's no choice. There's no intellect like thinking like, I think I'm going to, I think I'm going to sneeze now. And then, no, that's not how that works. Okay. Human acts, on the other hand, are actions humans do after deliberation. What that means, they think about them. So a human act is a person's going to think like, okay, I have this goal in mind. Here's one of the best ways to do it. I'm going to make the choice to do it. In morality, we are interested in human acts, not acts of humans. Maybe studying sleepwalkers is something that one of you should take up in grad school if you want to be a doctor or something. I'm not saying those things shouldn't be studied, but in the moral life, in the spiritual life, we're interested and worried about human acts. Okay. What are things people deliberately do? Okay. So, which that turns to the ethical constitution of the human act. A human act has two basic qualities that you guys may have already guessed. It has knowledge and freedom. What makes us unique, what makes an act properly human is the fact that it proceeds from our mind, our intellect, and our will. The mind has to have knowledge and the will has to have freedom. So notice what constitutes a human act is our knowing what we're doing and our freely choosing to do it. So let's look at knowledge first. Conduct or human choices spring from a motive that is directed to an end. What I mean by that is when you make choices, you see there's some end, some goal you want, and then you're motivated to get that goal, and then you start choosing how to get there. Okay. So conduct, our actions actually spring from our motivation to get certain ends. Okay. Now, your will, okay, and you have one. The will's, it's a blind faculty. It's a faculty, it's a power of striving after something, not knowing about it. So your will doesn't think or reflect upon stuff. Your will just strives for it. Okay. Your will is blind. Your will will take any good. Okay. It's got a natural innate appetite for goodness, but it can't identify it. What the intellect has to do is place good things before the will. So the will is like thinking more like trying to go, and the intellect has to go there, go there, go there. It has to direct it. Okay. An act is human only insofar as it is known. That's what follows from this. Okay. So your acts are truly human acts if you know what you're doing. So when you guys are listening to this podcast, you know Okay, you have an awareness that you want to, I have something to teach you that you want to learn. You think this will be good for you in some sense. In a podcast, listening to this in your car on the way to school or wherever you're listening to this is a good occasion to do that. Well, this is a human act because you're freely choosing to do it. Your intellect says, hey, learning some stuff from Mr. Mason's a good idea. And it'll help me be better and help me get to, where I want to go in life, hopefully heaven. And so your will then's willing to choose it. There you go. Okay. That's how that stuff works. Now, on the flip side, what's the other part of the act is the freedom. And a human act comes from both knowledge and will. And an act that comes from knowledge and will is called freedom. So your acts are free when they proceed from what you know and what you choose. A free act is a willed act, one that neither is forced on a person. So free acts aren't things that you're forced to do, like at gunpoint or something that takes away your freedom, nor do they arise spontaneously. So some people will have spontaneous reactions to certain things, okay? Those are not free acts. So even though you're doing them, those are acts of humans, not human acts, all right? So the type of acts we're interested in is we're interested in the ones you know what you're doing and you freely choose it. Now, what we will discover in future podcasts is that this isn't quite that clear cut and dry, because there's some things you just don't know or you don't choose, and there's some things that you do, and then there's a little bit of ground in the middle that we'll have to explore later, but not right now. Okay. We just want to get the basics down. So a willed free act is one that proceeds from what I know and what I choose. Here's how Aristotle said it. Aristotle said, since that which is done under compulsion or by reason of ignorance is involuntary, the voluntary would seem to be that of which the moving principle is in the agent himself, being aware of the particular circumstance of the action. Oh my gosh, what's that mean? What it just means is a free act is one not done out of compulsion. That means no one's forcing you to do it. And it's not done out of ignorance. Okay, you're not doing it like, I didn't know what I was doing. No, it's one you actually choose. Okay, St. Thomas Aquinas says it a little bit more succinctly. He says, it is of the nature of a voluntary act that its principle be within the agent, together with some knowledge of the end. So voluntary acts are things that you think about where you're going, you choose what you're going to do, and you do it. Okay. So let's review real quick, and I think we'll call it a week. Conduct are human acts that are consciously known and freely chosen. That's what conducts are. Our conduct is what's going to determine where we're going, which direction we're going, toward God or away. The two basic qualities of a human act, as we've talked about today, is knowledge points to the end. So knowledge says, that's where I want to go, and here's the best way to get there. And then what freedom picks out is our will's ability to choose those things which the intellect puts before it. That's the idea. So not too difficult, fellas, but very important. As you guys notice, if you remember the topics we're going to cover this year, after this month, okay, we are going to discuss freedom. That is, we're going to talk about what things that help you be more free, things that take away your freedom and all that stuff in between. And then we're going to talk about conscience. How do you make good choices? So notice the next 2 units are just unpacking what I just told you today. So that's a good place to stop here, fellas. I hope you guys have a blessed week. Keep out there, keep with that rule of life, keep saying your prayers, do the best you can. And if you should ever fall short, remember our God is merciful and just, and he will give you the graces to persist. So I hope you guys have a blessed week. See you next time.